Okay, so good morning all, and welcome back to our today's session, which is on prompt engineering for scientific research. So I hope that you can hear my voice properly. Um, Please, can someone confirm in the chat board? Yeah, voice is coming fine. Okay, so thank you, Priti, for confirming that the voice is fine. So today, our aim is actually to understand prompt engineering. But what I think, and when we actually look in Swallow Biotech for developing different AI intelligent platform, prompt engineering is where actually it comes. And as a researcher, as a scientist, with not having any coding background, prompt engineering plays very important role because it actually helps to convert the text, the idea which you actually put into text into the codes, and that code can be actually document data or a platform which can be useful. Now, to do that, you need to have large language models, that is ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, and all the models which are available. So, I think the prompt engineering, which I normally call that now scientific prompting, is very important skill and very important part when you are actually trying to get into AI from science background, because it actually helps to transfer our ideas into the tool which can be a AI tool. So when we are using the large language models, we are actually using them with the help of these prompts. But we need to understand that these are not the search engine like what we do with Google. They are actually a model which actually use your prompt and then synthesize them, and based on that predict, rather than just retrieve the information which is there in the public domain. So in some models you can also have the generative content, so you have to be very careful with that, that you are not actually having content which has been generated and it is not the real content which is in the public domain. So that is important to understand. Second is the professional track. So when you are actually working with this large language model with the scientific prompts or with the prompting, you need to make sure that you are not giving the generic prompts, because most of the time we use very generic prompt like here, make this better. So if you have a content and you uh, you know give to the LLMs and ask me to make it better, yes, it is going to make it better, but it will be a generic one. It will be not precise one for the for what you are actually looking. So when we look at the content, when we look at the um, the scientific research, developing a hypothesis, or developing a tool, or getting a content which can be useful uh, for our research, need to be precise, so that way the outcome will be also very precise, and it will waste, it will reduce your wastage of the time. And the third is the shift. So moving from opportunity chatting to systematic prompt engineering is important. So you will say that in the first go you will definitely don't have the prompt which will be more specific. But once you actually have that prompt, you need to make sure that similar types of prompt will be used, so that way it will be more specific. And that's where we actually developed a tool, which I will show you some of the glimpse in this today's session, that how actually they produce the prompt and why that is important when you are taking information for your research or for developing something. So you need to work with that shit. Now, what is prompt engineering? So, as I said, that it has been like misunderstood, like a research tool where you are just asking a question and it will give you the answer. Yes, it does that, but you need to understand that you need to design a structural query, so that way the AI model get guidance, and it will produce very scientific outcome which can be also reproducible. So it is like thinking of it as a designing an experiment. So the quality of your prompt is going to determine the quality of the output. So let's say, for example, if you are saying, "Tell me about curcumin," or "Tell me about X, Y, Z." It can be relevant to small molecules. It can be relevant to disease. So tell me about oral cancer. Now this will again will create content, and it will be very generic. But if you put the prompt development skills, that is, you are putting a structural query, like you are saying that you are a pharmacologist. If you are talking about a pathway, or if you are talking about a disease, or which is relevant to what you want to get it done, you will be saying to the LLM that you are going to act as a pharmacologist, analyze, in this case, curcumin mechanism in oral cancer, identify the molecular target, and present finding in the structural table. Now, this is going to give you the outcome which will be scientifically actionable and structural response. Now, you are not going to, design this type of prompt straight away, and we are going to discuss later the types of the prompts. So, in that, I will, give you that how you starting and how you end up with the structural prompt. So, prompting is not asking; it is actually designing a experiment, designing a output, designing a information which will be needed for you to take it further in the form of the content, in the research, in the hypothesis, or even developing tools as well. And there were actually we what we have done, I will show you the tool the Swalife has developed, is developed with the prompt engineering and to design the scientific prompt. Now there is a structure for this prompt, and you need to understand the framework. So as I told you in the previous slide, that you are in the example you are saying as a pharmacologist. So you are giving the role to that the large language model. In this case, the role is that you are an oncologist pharmacologist, oncology pharmacologist. You can say that you are clinician. You any further details which you want, you need to give the role to the large language model, and then you are going to give the context. So first will be the role, and the second will be the context, that what information you want the large language model to be focused. So give me information about XYZ is not a prompt which will be useful, because it will give you the generic information. But if you give the role and if you give the context, now in the context, you will be asking the LLM to focus on a specific area, and that first you need to understand that this area where you are actually doing work or you want to focus, you need to have some background of it, and then you will be giving the context. And the third will be the task. Now in the task, it can be like, if you are talking about the disease focus, you can ask them to identify the top 5 validated molecular targets for certain molecule in certain disease, and explaining the mechanism of action. Now again, in this you are specifying the task, so that way it will focus on that. And then the output. Now in the output, you can ask them to present them in the table, in the paragraph, or giving the and then giving the problem statement or giving the hypothesis. All this can be in the output. Even you can ask that how it is relevant to clinical, how it is relevant to commercial, or how you can actually move into the patenting of this work which you are planning to do. So this is the prompt, scientific prompt, or the skill which you need for prompt engineering. Prompt engineering not about just prompting, just asking the question. It is about the designing of the prompt and the tools which we have got, which you will be allocated, and you will be running your projects, will be the uh, prompt designing tool, which will be for that specific project, so that way you can actually have that specific information. So I call this a scientific prompt because we are working on the science of this prompting. So that way we can have a clear information about the research which we are working. So AI will give you clear research role, context, task, and outcome format only if you have a better prompt. And if you are giving a bad prompt, like tell me about cancer, it will tell you about the cancer, but it is not going to be very focused on where you want to work. Now, with just starting in the field, it will be difficult to have that information that how I can actually make the better prompt. But as you move into the field, having some generic prompt, getting information, and then moving into the more better prompt will actually give you the uh, you know uh, good content of information which is needed for you to develop your hypothesis. Now, if you look at this, prompt example where we already discussed about curcumin in oral cancer, if you're prompting with the role, context, task, and the output, like you are oncology pharmacologist, in the context of oral cell carcinoma, identify the top molecular target of curcumin, explain its multi-pathway mechanism, and generate a testable hypothesis linking curcumin with the target to induce the mechanism, and then the output will be the table. So now you gone in detail to understand that how actually curcumin can be useful as a inhibitor for carcinoma cells in oral cancer. So that will be your starting point. Not like oral cancer and curcumin. Oral cancer and curcumin will be there initially because you don't have any idea. You can always start with the Perplexity, that is one of the large language model, and Google Scholar. I will always suggest that you should always have Google Scholar articles as well, so that way you can have your own databases as well. Because when the large language models start creating hallucinations, it will actually give you the articles which are not there in public domain. And when you're working with the literature review, when you're working to get the information, you should always use minimum two large language model. One can be Perplexity, other one can be Gemini or Cloud. So with the literature review, we always with the literature review, we always actually go for two large language models. So in this case, when you create this type of prompt, the outcome is expected that there will be a table with validated targets. Mechanism description will be there, which will link with the pathways, and hypothesis with the experimental solutions. So if you look at this information, previously when you are doing the literature review and developing the hypothesis was taking weeks and months, but with the large language model and a proper prompt, you can get it done in the hours now. So that is where the it works. So the anatomy is fixed, that it can give you perfect prompt when you actually give the instruction, the context, and the input data, which will actually lead you to get the output indicators in the form of the Word file, PDF file, but there is also JSON and Markdown files, which are also very important when you want to actually give to the other large language model. So it is very important to understand the anatomy of the perfect prompt. Now, this is what will happen if you give the vague prompt. It will be very difficult to reproduce the content, and that is where actually we understand this, that if we are working on identifying small molecules in cancer and we want to actually test them, when we were using large language model, a lot of information was there because our initial prompts were very vague and they were not that targeted. And then we understand that there is a need for having this prompt engineering skill, which will be useful to generate the prompts for every time similar prompt when we are using different molecule and the disease. And there were actually the tools were developed. And again, for developing the tool, we use the large language model only. So this is the the engine prompting, where you actually have the structural format that we discuss, and that way it will have the clarity. So this is the toolkit. So before actually going to toolkit, I will just show you the platform, so that way you will understand that what I'm trying to actually say here, because um, you okay. So this is one of the predictive intelligence platform. Can you see? Yeah. So this is one of the platform, one of the intelligent tool which we have developed for predictive medicine. So when I want to run a project, so now let's say for example I have a molecule, let's say routine, and I want to use it in skin cancer. So I will add here. I am creating the cream, so I will give the dosage form or formulation as cream. I can add the regulatory for what purpose, let's say globally, target population is there, literature review and evidence structure is, and this is for demo purpose. I'm showing it here. Now this tool we have developed using the prompt engineering for our projects, so that way it will be having the same prompt which will be there for each plant molecule which we are using. So now the prompt will be it will be here. So if you see from the world, it is the prompt is already there. But when I save this information, which is here, the context will be not change it. So here I have to load the first one. So you can see it is still the old one. So once I say load, it has given me the prompt. So you can see the prompt now. The similar prompt which I showed you in the presentation, that you are pharma R&D scientific analyst for Swallow Biotech. Build a complete structural evidence pack for the molecule, the disease, the formulation, global and 4060, and I have given the rules which are we have designed based on what we are working on, and also it will give me at the end the references. So now this is one of the the tool which we are using. That will be the first layer when we are doing the literature review. The second layer, which is the second prompt, once you actually have the information from the first prompt, you paste here, and then you save the run, and then again what you do, you load the LK2, which is going to, now you can see, change. So now it has changed the first prompt. Now it has become, you are scientific data curator, right? So this is what actually the tool is doing. So you don't have to now work on designing the prompt, because we already have got the tool which will be beneficiary to actually um, use in the project. So that way the prompts are not going to change. And whatever formulation we are doing, so if we are working in the skincare, we will have the similar prompt in the formulation that we are developing. So that's the reason it was developed. It is at the stage of the agentic AI now. This is not agentic AI. This is just the beginning phase of the prompt AI prompt engineering, where it will be only useful, and then the prompts are taken and then added to the large language model. So it is a financially viable model for starting the project. Now we will come back to the presentation, which is not visible. Okay, so now can you see the presentation? What's happening? Okay, can you see the presentation? The entire window. Okay, so when we continue, so we'll continue with the scientific prompting, the prompt engineering. They actually comes into four part, and when we are talking about chain of thought, that is where actually the prompt designing, which I showed you, the framework comes. But you start with the zero shot, that is like test the model baseline, where you are not reasoning with any example. You just give a prompt to make sure that actually it can give you the reply, so that way you will have the information, and based on that you can develop your few shot, that is providing the some of the example to the large language model. Once you got that information, you should go for chain of thought, where you will be forcing the model to show the reasoning step by step, so that way it can reduce the error in the complex analysis or complex content. So that's the chain of thought. And in the decomposition, you break the complex research task into the focus subtasks, which will be handled by specialized prompt. So once you have the the scientific prompt, you will get the information, and you need to make sure that you are going to break down those tasks, because the information. So for, let's say for example, if you're working with the clinical research and you are designing a protocol, so now when you are designing a protocol, you will actually have the molecule, you will have the disease. Once you got the information, you can separate the molecules and the disease with the subtasks, so that way a specialized prompt can be created separately for those subtasks, and that way you will have the information which is needed from the large language, that is the AI models. So, in the reasoning, chain of thoughts is very important because it actually reduces the logical error which can comes in the data analysis by forcing the model to reason rather than directly coming to the conclusion. So it will work like, you give the problem, it will trigger the reasoning, and then it will validate the step. So it is going to think step by step. It is not going to come directly to the conclusion without reason. So it will be best used when you are trying to generate the hypothesis, or you evaluating your data. In case of the scientists from mathematical background for mathematical complex calculation, if you're developing the codes for some tools, it can be useful for debugging and for the code writing. And the decomposed prompt will be useful when you are identifying the subtask. So it will break that complex research, as I told you earlier, into the subtask. Then it will assign the specialized prompt, so that way you can then synthesize the result, which will give you the output will be in the intelligent platform. So the agentic AI that we have got is actually making subtasks like a sub agents, and then based on that the components are separate and the prompts are generated to that subtask, so that way it can give us the agentic AI information which is needed for the research pipeline. So the advanced framework work by React agentic workflow and self-criticism loop, which is important when you are actually working with the scientific or prompt engineering for your research, where AI is a research assistant and not a replacement for the work which you need to do. So the most powerful scientific outcome is going to be through human expertise only, with the help of the AI capability, right? So that is where we are actually working on. So that way, when you are doing anything with the AI, you need to keep in mind that the AI, the tools, the large language model is not going to give you everything, not 100%. Your role in there will be very important and critical if you develop the skills relevant to the the AI which is needed in the scientific research. Now let's see the pitfalls which are there in the AI. As I mentioned earlier, when you are doing the literature mining, you should always use two models of the LLMs, because hallucination is one of the critical area which is being created in the large language model in the AI. Large language models we will be discussing tomorrow in detail. But large language models means the ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, all those actually can generate statistically generative text that will are not verified fact, and that can actually create a issue if they are gone through the peer review process and now they are in the public domain. So it will be very difficult, and that data maybe can claim very incorrect claims, and it will be there in the public domain. So it is one of the major issue which need to be looked into when we are looking the large language model for the scientific research purpose, because it is generating the citations. Now the second is the ethical as well. We discussed yesterday about this, that any innovation in AI or digital need to be very transparent, because it need to take the responsibility uh, by the ownership. So it can be the company, it can be the researcher. So that way it will clearly be useful because of the transparency, and that specific tool will be very important to use, because the second thing comes is that the data privacy, because as you use, so in case of the clinical research, when you are using the data from the patient, you need to clearly give the information about that how the data privacy will be maintained, because concern is taken from the patient to be part of the studies. But when it comes to taking it further, commercializing those, you need to have the data privacy statement, which will be very important when handling the sensitive data. And the third is the bias awareness. Actively identify and correction of the models are very important, because, like yesterday we discussed, patient from different demographic area can actually show different reason. So anything which has been developed in Europe, not considering the participant from Asian countries, will have to validate the tool and the work, because it might actually not give you the same results. So you need to build your research system based on all this information. And when we are using the scientific prompting, prompt engineering, you need to make sure that you are treating prompt as a system which can develop the code, the content, and that content need to be validated. So once you have the prompt, the AI, the large language models are going to evaluate the quality and accuracy of your primary model, and then it will give you the model which will perform the task which you want. So as I showed you the tool, initially it is not the first version. We have actually different versions, and then we have come to this end. Again, we are taking it further into the agentic, so it is not ended there. As we use different large language models, we are modifying the tool based on the our company needs. So here, just an example using AI to build a research agenda. Prompting can be used to move the raw data into a structural format. So just recently we had offline internship of the four students from Vishwakarma University in Pune. And at that time we have tested this, where we actually collected the raw data using the large language model with this predictive intelligence, and we have modified that. I will share those uh, articles which we have published in the group, so that way you will understand that how we can use the data, the raw data, and put them into a structural format. So that way human intervention is important here, because the data which you collect, the AI is not going to give you the final version. Your expertise in the domain will be utilized. So most of the time the prompts are giving you valuable information, but when you putting them into the output, it has to be improved by using your expertise. So it is a systematic practice which is going to give you the high quality research. So each information which you collected using the prompt need to have a repeatable information when you are using the same prompt in the other large language data models. So that way you can see that it is not showing a conflict. So systematic practice is going to give you the quality. So when we look at the scientific inquiries, that is the scientific prompting or the prompt engineering, at the moment manual prompting, individual experimentations are going on. But as I told you that we are in the second, where we are using the agentic tool, that is the cloud code, and we are actually putting the scientific prompt, and directly the sub agents are created, which gives us the literature, the data information, which are synthesizing and giving me the information. I will show you the actually the data, the file which we have created with the agentic AI as well. And third will be transition of this AI augmented intelligence practice to every research operating with the personalized domain. So that way it can be trained with the AI system. So there where the future of this scientific inquiries are moving into at the moment. So the researchers manifesto should be specific, structural, and skeptical. That way you will master the core technique and keep the human in the loop. So you shouldn't go for the generic prompt. If you keeping the generic prompt and the information, it will be generic. And if you don't keep the human in the loop, the hallucination will create the generative text which will go in the public domain, and it may be not the peer review content. So start engineering your research today. So instead of chatting with AI, start programming your prompt with the intention, with the structure, and with the scientific rigor. So that way you will have a content. Well, engineering question is going to give you the well structural content, which will help you to develop your discipline in the identifying the information which is needed for your research. Before ending, if you have any question, you can put them into the comments. But before ending, I will just show you, the document which we have created using the agentic AI. So if you have any question, you can ask the questions. So this is the uh, the platform research intelligence that we have created. So these are total 11 agents which has been created, and uh, these are the roles, what they do. So once when you are want to run, you put in your research topic. There are other details you need to fill if you want, and you can also upload your own PDF relevant to the topic which you got. It can be from Google Scholar or other databases. It will do all this. So now I will show you the result which that agentic AI has created for one of the report. Okay, so I run that question, that is curcumin in oral cancer carcinoma chemo prevention, and it run the model on different AI models which are available with the help of the API, and it has created the information. So it has given me the structural insight, then the target pathways, and the other information which is being collected by the agentic AI. So you need to understand here. So human were the one who were doing this. Now the agents are there which will be doing, and then there will be person who will be looking at the content based on the, as I told you, the expertise. So they will understand that how curcumin is used to done with the curcumin. So all this is generated with that. So which is there in the public domain. So it does the literature mining process. Okay, so there is one question. So as there are so many AI models, how can we ensure that this model will align with our work or with our project and give more accurate data in compared to rest of the AI model? And that's where I said that the AI models are going to be assisting you. They are not going to do your work till you put them into the agentic AI. which is like a model of perplexity, which actually give you information with citation. So when you are doing a research, it is definitely suggested that minimum two AI models are used. So if you are doing a literature search for your project, you start with Perplexity and Gemini is there. So that way you for the three models, you are the one will be then looking at the content, and based on that you are going to decide that this is the model's capacity, and based on that only we have created the prompt library using our tools. Why? Because the prompt library is important. You need to make sure that every time when you are giving prompts to the LLM, you are not changing the the scenario. So if you look at the science, when we design the experiment in the lab, we run it in triplicate, so that way you will have a the data which is relevant to in the clearer. It is like similar to that only. If you are running a prompt, today you are running, can you show me this, and tomorrow you are actually asking similar question but in different, it is going to give you the generic different information, and for that reason you need to have a structural prompt using the framework which I mentioned, but simultaneously there are now tools available, and also you can manually do that by generating prompts. So now, in case of many of the LLMs, they have started creating projects. You can create a project for the prompts, and you can give them the instruction that every time when I'm putting this, you have to give me the structural prompt, and that structural prompt you can use in your large language model which you want to align with your work, so that way your project will be having the accurate data which will be comparable. So now, to give you an example, if you are working with pharmacovigilance, Grok model is useful because it can be connected with social media. Simultaneously, Perplexity will be there because it can be connected with the website, web search. Now, even ChatGPT, Gemini, Cloud, they can be connected with the web search. So it depends on how you actually utilize the scientific prompt, and that's why when we started, I said that scientific prompting, that is the prompt engineering, is the major skill for the researcher, not the coding and all the other thing. Because if you put the scientific prompt or the prompting properly, you can generate any type of the code. And then, yes, the other thing, the next step comes about debugging or if there is any issue. At that time, again, you coming back to the large language model and you are trying to understand that how we can, do the issues which we are facing with the tool. And that's how we have done. We have got numbers of tools now which we are using, and we have developed the formulations out of it, which we are using for preventive and precision treatment, and we are moving into the you know uh, in the product based category. We are already in there, but previously we were more focused on using the literature. But now using the literature, we are creating the hypothesis which we are testing in vitro, in vivo, and then moving into clinical. So that's how the model works. Thank you for the question. Okay, so thank you for attending the today's session. So yesterday we discussed about AI role, and today we discuss about the scientific prompting, prompt engineering. Tomorrow we will be talking about the large language models, and then in large language model I will be adding also generative, generative AI. So that way you will have a connection that how the scientific prompting are connected to the large language model, because once you start your project you will be not doing scientific prompting because the tool I showed you, and also other tools will be there based on which internship you are part of. So you will have the prompt already designed. What you need to do is that you will utilize those prompt in your project. And as I told you, your role will be to understand the information which you got from the large language model. So you need to understand that how the large language models work. Okay, thank you. Okay, so there is one more question that I have. One more question: is AI model also assisting ADR reporting? Yes, creating the reports, AI can assist. Not in the reporting. Reporting has to be done through the channels only. But yes, they do collect the information and create the draft of the report. Okay, thank you. Thank you all for joining and attending the session. Thank you.